Hey there guys, welcome back to the new video where I'm going to be talking about all the movies that I watched in theaters this June in 2026. Honest to God, this is probably the best or one of the best months that I've ever had for movies. Just an incredible run of great movies that I saw every weekend. Yes, there are some films that I did not love as much, but if you just look at the quantity of great movies I watched this month, it is easily one of the best months I've ever had in a very, very long time. So let's just quickly get on ahead with the video. I started off the month with the much awaited Malayalam film Mollywood Times. Now, why is it that almost every Indian movie that starts out promising almost always becomes a hot mess in its post-interval second half? That is the summary of my experience with this film. Given that it's a new Malayalam film, the odds of it being good aren't too low. Plus, I had heard good things about the director due to his previous film, and the lead of the film is also a budding superstar in his industry. But my excitement for the film mainly stemmed from the fact that it stars a character who wishes of being a great filmmaker. So I already knew that I'm going to be able to relate to the story, or at least the character, to some degree, and yes, relate I did. Naslin is wonderful in the lead role as the ambitious and wide-eyed protagonist who loves cinema more than anything in the world. He perfectly captures that obsession through his eyes that speak of wanting nothing but greatness. He is charming, driven, sometimes unlikable, but never someone who is uninteresting to watch on screen. The first half of the film starts out strong, establishing the characters and the protagonist's undying love for the medium of cinema and his huge ambitions of being the greatest horror filmmaker of Malayalam cinema. The filmmaking is inventive, aided by sharp sound design that adds to the whimsical and joyful nature of the film. But the second half is when the film started to crumble. The narrative becomes incredibly convoluted, filled with characters that become cartoonish villains in no time. Too many coincidences and plot contrivances completely took me out of the story. The structure too becomes messy, with several time jumps, supporting characters randomly going in and out of the story, and some characters even randomly gain new motivations that come out of nowhere. I got what the film was aiming for, to talk about how the film industry is run by people whose only real aim is to make a profit and not good art, and how that results in mediocrity being celebrated while visionary artists are usually ripped off or go underappreciated. The film does stand out from your average commercial film because it has this angst around it. It contains this youthful cynicism that I actually quite liked. I think this film has very interesting things to say about the state of the film industry and how monopolized it all is. But it's just that these themes aren't explored properly because of just how overstuffed and eventually aimless the film starts to feel in its running minutes. The filmmaking too takes a backseat as the narrative spins out of control and devolves into an absolute train wreck. Now, it's hard for me to dislike a film that so evidently comes from a personal space. I can tell that this film is a beloved passion project from the mind of someone who has important things to say, and plus it's a movie starring a character who loves movies. I can't hate that. But as someone who was very much looking forward to seeing this, I can't help but be disappointed by the final product. There was a lot of potential given all that this film wanted to explore, but sadly I wish it had more focus and executed it with more bite. Bandar. This is certainly not a bad movie by any means, but unsurprisingly, it's not too dissimilar from most of Anurag Kashyap's recent films, meaning that it's well made, looks good, and is captivating, but it lacks the punch and quality of his earlier work that has set the bar so high for a revered filmmaker like him. I know that he's trying to carve a new niche for himself with his recent slate of films, but it's hard not to think of the great work that has defined him as one of the finest directors of our country. The film certainly has some interesting explorations about the justice system and the inner workings and hierarchies present amongst prisoners, but I wish the film further explored these fascinating themes rather than just scratching the surface. Ultimately, the film brings up several compelling themes but rarely says something definitive about them, leaving the film to feel structurally and thematically messy. And while I'm aware that this film isn't regressive in its politics, I've just been wondering whether we really need a film that emphasizes about false rape cases against men. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be allowed to tell this kind of story and that it doesn't happen at all, but at a time when people rarely believe women in the first place, I feel like this film is an easy target for misogynists to claim that women weaponize rape laws. And because the film isn't too clear about what it exactly wants to say about false cases, I fear this film can be very easily misinterpreted to fuel many people's chauvinist agendas. Either way, this film is infinitely better than the crap we are usually fed with mainstream Hindi cinema on a weekly basis. But still, that should not be the bar that's set. I am really waiting to fall in love with a new Kashyap film. That day has not come yet, but I am still very happy to see that the man is still making movies, and I will gladly see each and every one of them. Backrooms. The biggest achievement of this film is managing to make a compelling narrative feature based off of a concept that's popular because of its spatial design. It must have been a really difficult task to take the Backrooms concept and make a film about it, featuring a story and characters, given that the concept itself is popular due to its eerie vibe. But the film very cleverly takes the infinite vastness of these rooms and thematically weaves a story about childhood trauma, cannibalization of nostalgia, the horrors of consumerism, the cyclical loop of bad habits due to learned helplessness, and finding comfort in the unlikeliest of places due to crippling loneliness. It was actually genius to take this concept and craft this as an emotional through line for it. Speaking of craft, the filmmaking here is phenomenally confident for a first-time feature film director. Kane shows incredible command behind the camera. Of course, he is the right person to make a film on this concept since he is so well versed with its mythology and lore, but he's managed to make a movie with better filmmaking than most Hollywood films these days, and that's really saying something. This film in particular is more eerie and unsettling than outright scary, but it actually makes for a completely gripping watch from start to finish, where I was constantly at the edge of my seat, scanning the contents of each and every frame, trying to find any lurking dangers in order to predict any potential jump scares. It taps into an odd sense of familiarity, which is simultaneously also what makes it so spooky. The monsters, though scary, aren't as terrifying as the thought of being stuck alone in an endless series of rooms without sunlight. It scratches an unexplainably weird itch while being a spine-chilling thought at the same time. And I'm really glad that the film does not sit and try to explain the origin of the Backrooms, for it would have detracted from the mystery and allure of the concept entirely. That level of restraint reeks of confidence, and it's more of what we need to see in movies today. But yeah, it's actually astonishing to see this film become the raging success at the box office. To see films like this and Obsession resonate with the public indicates a hopefully potential shift in the kind of films Hollywood chooses to produce. The hype for this film is palpable and completely deserving, for it is a true cinematic achievement. मैं वापस आऊंगा. I'm pretty sure that this is the best Hindi film of the year so far. Imtiaz Ali is in a very interesting phase of his career at the moment. He has gone from making incredibly character-driven films to making films that reflect the societal and nationwide turmoils and how that affects his characters. It feels like he's actively maturing as a filmmaker and a storyteller. And his latest venture is a perfect example of it. I certainly did have high expectations from this film due to its director, but man, did I just not expect how much of an emotional journey this film was going to be. Setting an inter-community romance during the time of partition needn't be the most mind-blowing idea, but the sheer conviction with which Imtiaz executes this tale is what makes this film so effective. His filmmaking is restrained and patient, usually allowing its performers to live and breathe in their scenes. You get an authentic feeling of the time period and charming characters who feel lived in and real. It's these moments of seeming mundanity that allows you to fall in love with these characters as flesh and blood human beings, which only makes the rest of the movie so heartbreaking to witness because we get to see the political state of the country tear apart our lead characters in ways more than one, making their love rebellious in nature. We see how the political slowly bleeds its way into the personal, and how the characters face irreparable repercussions because of it. That's why even the title of the film holds tremendous emotional weight behind it. When the line is said, understanding the context of the title makes it all the more gut-wrenching. And this emotional connect is also credited due to the wonderful cast of actors that breathe life into this already excruciatingly tragic tale of love and loss. Vedang Raina and Sharvari have tremendously palpable chemistry, and Nasiruddin Shah probably gives one of the finest and most achingly vulnerable performances that I have seen this year. Shockingly enough, I actually think Diljit Dosanjh was one of the weaker parts of the film. His character's track needed a lot more refining, and though he was charming, he just felt like a persona of the celebrity he is rather than the character. The film isn't perfect either. The narrative approach of hopscotching between timelines becomes a little too self-indulgent at times, and its attempt to contrast modern and old-fashioned romance seems a little dated. But despite all of its flaws, of which there are few, the film's experimental use of lensing, A.R. Rahman's wonderful music, and a poignant story of one of India's most heartbreaking chapters is what elevates this film as one of the finest I have seen recently. Half of the theatre was sobbing towards the end, and most audience members stayed throughout the credits, taking in whatever they had just witnessed. And during the credits, Imtiaz tells us about how horrific chapters of history, such as genocide and ethnic cleansing, are still very prevalent in today's day and age, playing footage of many such crises happening in the world right now, instantly showcasing more courage and spine than most celebrities today. The bar for Hindi cinema at the moment is incredibly low. More often than not, we get to see nonsense slop being produced from this industry that are empty star vehicles for superstar actors or the umpteenth sequel of a dated franchise that nobody asked to see. Mainstream films have unsurprisingly even begun to embrace AI. But amidst such crap, it's so wonderful to see a filmmaker like Imtiaz make real movies. To see a filmmaker who actually cares about this medium to tell stories that feel honest and personal. It revived what little hope I had in this industry, and to see this film become the success it deserves to be brings me nothing but joy. I'm so glad that audiences are stepping into cinemas to see this one, because it would have been tragic for this film to gain a fan following years ahead of its release. You do not see movies like these made very often, and audiences should champion them when they can. This one here is something special. Disclosure Day. Steven Spielberg is a filmmaker who means a lot to me. Not only have I grown up with his films, he is someone whose films I've continued to rediscover in my later years. Each one consecutively changed the way I watched movies more than the last. He's obviously one of the most influential filmmakers in the history of the medium, but he is also someone who has played a huge part in my own journey as a filmmaker and storyteller. And to see his latest film in a theatre is a privilege that I am very glad I got to experience. This has been one of my most anticipated movies of the year, so did it live up or was I disappointed? The answer isn't quite clear, because I have some mixed thoughts on the film despite loving it. One thing is for certain, and that is that I had an absolute blast seeing this in cinemas. It's one of the most well-made and thoroughly entertaining blockbusters of the summer. John Williams imbues his magical score as usual, and the film remains an engaging and gripping thriller from frame one. But unsurprisingly, my favorite aspect of this movie is the filmmaking. No one does this shit like Spielberg, man. The masterful blocking and framing is so inventive that it is essentially Spielberg just showing off why he is the best in the business. Him and his DOP Janusz Kaminski collaborate once again to redefine the visual grammar of cinema. The way the film plays with focus, reflections, lens flares, overexposure, how it finds many creative frames amidst its beautifully orchestrated long takes, and how the camera moves is just straight up out of this world. Spielberg's filmmaking is something that personally brings me a lot of joy. The camera moves and ingenious blocking in his movies is practically film school in and of itself, and Disclosure Day doesn't disappoint in that regard. The filmmaking here is exciting and endlessly innovative. It could fuel my own creative engines for decades. But what the film also has to say about humans as a species and how only collective empathy can save us from extinction is something that's incredibly poignant in today's time. This is not a conventional alien movie that you would expect to see from Spielberg. It is nothing like E.T. In fact, it's actually a deeply bizarre movie that goes in interesting directions and makes weird but bold narrative choices that nobody would have seen coming. It's this strangeness in particular that runs the risk of alienating the general audience, and clearly it has. But I personally really admire seeing a director of this caliber still be willing to explore and experiment in his latest original Hollywood blockbuster. Not all of it works, but it's refreshing to see a mainstream film take such big and bold creative swings. The film isn't at all perfect. Its choice to begin in the middle of the action is certainly interesting, but results in a mild emotional disconnect from its lead characters. I wanted to know a little more about the world of the film as well. The film asks a lot of interesting questions about faith, the atrocities human beings commit on non-human creatures, government secrecy, and whether humanity can even handle life-altering revelation. But I just wish the film explored these themes more thoroughly. Either way, it is so wonderful to see one of the most prolific filmmakers of our time still attempt to ask such questions in his newest science fiction action movie. It's not a traditional alien movie because it uses aliens to talk about humanity as a whole and how disconnected we are as a species due to a collective sense of apathy. But despite how bleak it all can seem, Spielberg makes a plea for us to simply listen to each other, for us to empathize and communicate with one another. Maybe only then there is a better hope for tomorrow. After that, I had one of the most hectic movie weekends I've ever had in a very long time. I watched 6 movies in theaters in just 3 days. So I started off with Maa Inti Bangaaram. I had quite some fun watching this. It has tons of problems with its script regarding fleshing out its characters, a lackluster backstory, too much forced comedy, and a very straightforward and predictable story, and a super generic villain. We have seen this type of story done a million times and better. So there's nothing truly defining in that aspect, but it's just super cool to see a mainstream commercial masala movie starring a woman who gets to kick some serious ass. It felt nice to see audiences cheering for a leading woman doing some really cool action. Hoping to see more stuff like this from Indian cinema. Then I watched The Furious. It had been a hot minute since I had seen a film this fucking insane. I don't even know how to express what this film has made me feel because it's truly monumental. This film melted my brain in the best ways. It is barely 2 hours long, yet it felt like 3 hours, and I mean that as a good thing. This is a film that knows exactly what it is. It knows that it's very clearly a genre film, so it does the little but effective character work that's necessary to ground all the action sequences in some emotion that we can latch onto. But it's smart because the film gets the ball rolling just when it needs to. There is not a single wasted moment. The film starts to run and refuses to let out. It's got an unending amount of relentless energy throughout its runtime and fully utilizes every minute of it. The script is not perfect, but the film so successfully achieves what it sets out to do that I genuinely could not give a fuck as to what did not work. Because this movie is truthfully one of, if not the best action movies I have seen this decade. Every action set piece just had my jaw drop to the floor, wondering how the fuck did they even do all of this? And it also has some of the most inventive and bug-nuts insane action sequences that I've seen in a film. The choreography is so creative and brutal that it almost feels like a balletic dance. The sound design and energetic camera movement make each and every impact feel like the most painful thing you have ever heard. I kid you not, every 5 minutes into this film, I was just in pure awe of what I was witnessing. The action is so relentless and so ludicrous that I found myself laughing in several moments at the sheer insanity on screen. The film executes all of its ideas with so much conviction that I gladly believed everything I saw. It's the power of movie magic, man. There wasn't a single audience member in my theater who was busy talking or on their phone. Everyone was completely logged in from scene 1 and were very audibly reacting to every fight scene. It was wonderful to experience this film so viscerally with a bunch of strangers on a Friday night. It had been a while since I had whooped and cheered in a theater with a packed audience who were all just as pumped as I was. But as simple and as straightforward as the main narrative is, the film also manages to surprise you at times apart from its action. But it very well knows what it set out to deliver and what a knockout experience it delivers. Truly one of the most insane and exciting theatrical experiences that I've ever had. The last time I was this mind blown by an action film, it was probably John Wick Chapter 4. After this movie, I felt like rewatching the Raid movies and the old Jackie Chan movies that I used to watch as a kid. This film took me back for my love of kung fu movies and action movies and just how excited and fired up I used to be and how it made me feel. It reminded me of the power of movies and its ability to entertain, shock, and completely blow us out of the water. After that, I watched Colony. Watching this film in a theater with a completely packed audience was incredible. It is a very well made and engaging thriller that does new and interesting things with its zombie lore that makes them even more terrifying. I love that the film works as a genre piece, but it's primarily a contained action drama. It's got characters we care about just enough and a constantly moving plot that finds inventive ways to unfold. The film looks great too and manages to be emotionally compelling amidst all of its blood and gore. It takes whatever you would expect from a zombie film and takes it to a whole new level with the sheer ambition it exudes in its storytelling. This was a great fucking time at the movies. Toy Story 5. I honestly don't know whether this film pleasantly surprised me or disappointed me because I went into this film not too excited for it but still slightly hopeful because of the sheer amount of positive reviews surrounding it. Suffice it to say, I thought that this was just okay. The animation is unsurprisingly great. The 2D animated bits were really inventive. I like that Jessie is the protagonist here. I think the themes it wants to explore are timely, and it has a few scenes that are pretty emotionally effective, even if they don't match the highs of the film that came before it. It is not a bad film by any measure. But the way the film explores its themes are just way too heavy-handed. A lot of the characters simply don't have much to do. Its ultimate messaging and how it chooses to go about it are extremely predictable, and it's got clunky pacing with a side plot that seems forced and contrived. I am not mad that they made a fifth one. I guess Pixar is primarily going to focus on their sequels now onwards. I just simply didn't mind this film. It's not bad, but I just don't understand how anyone thought that this was a story that needed to be told. This is my least favorite film in the franchise. By the way, Hoppers, that was great. More of those and less of these. Balan, the boy. I did not know what to expect from this film since I actively avoided seeing the trailers, but I'm glad I went into it blind because I thought this was a solid film. First of all, it looks absolutely beautiful with a soft pastel look to it, aided by hazy blues that took me back to Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine Is Light. It also sounds incredible, aided by a propulsive score that's more evocative than pulsating. The central relationship at the heart of the story works as an emotional anchor throughout the film, but I also admire the film's narratively experimental nature. It doesn't run on the expected conventions of how a traditional screenplay would play out. The film is entirely unpredictable, for it plays like a series of separate scenes that feel interconnected. And yet it feels so deeply strange and uncomfortable. The ideas of shifting relationships of parenthood and the loss of childhood innocence are pretty effective for sure, but the film's unique editing pattern that refuses to spoon-feed the audience and show restraint with its melodrama is probably the film's most admirable aspect. The solid filmmaking reeked of maturity and confidence. Now, this film isn't perfect. Though I am a fan of slow-paced films, the pace of the second half meanders a little too much, almost straying away from its central conceit at times. It's got some great ideas that I'd wished we had gotten a fuller sense of despite the lengthy runtime, but amidst everything, the film still manages to craft an emotional climax. I'm glad that after the insane success of Manimal Boys, we got to see something much more intimate, small-scale and seemingly personal from the director. Though it may not work in a few moments, the overall film most certainly works as a cohesive piece, and while I haven't really loved any of the Malayalam films that I've seen from this year so far, this one just might be my favorite as of now. The voice of Hind Rajab. I knew that this was going to be an incredibly tough watch, but it's also been one of my most anticipated films from last year, so I am incredibly grateful to have gotten to watch this in theaters. I'd known about the real life story behind this film, and I was very curious to see how they would adapt this very recent tragedy in the film format. They did not disappoint. Now, I feel a little weird talking about this film because it's something that I felt in my bones first and intellectualized later. It completely works as an honest and emotionally truthful recreational document of how the murder of this little girl unfolded. The film does not waste any time and gets to the point quickly. It is unafraid to throw us into the situation immediately and hooks us right till the end. And though I feel a little strange analyzing this film's narrative choices and craft, I still think that it's important and something definitely worth talking about, for it's what provides this subject matter a platform to stand on. The handheld filmmaking with the constant focus shifts perfectly captured the chaos and the anxiety that everyone was feeling in that moment. The choice to set the entire film in that one office space and giving us an idea of the carnage taking place outside, primarily through sound design, is something that works as a restriction for a low-budget independent film, but also does wonders, for it's these creative choices that make this film so emotionally effective, apart from its already gut-wrenching story. And of course, the film's approach of creating a docu-fiction drama by recreating several moments through actors and blending it with theirs and Hind's real voice is an approach that pays off and only makes the experience much more heartbreaking, knowing that we are hearing the voice of the actual girl who was there in that moment. Its use of real footage and the perfectly reconstructed performances that play along simultaneously at times adds to the stylistic personality of the film without once taking away from the gravity of the situation. The film knows exactly what it's about and treats the topic with the seriousness and sensitivity it deserves. And towards the end, the film just leaves you with this ugly feeling of what oppression and genocide looks like, of how capable some human beings are of being cruel to one another, but also how empathetic and loving they can be. Either way, it shines a light on this horrific real-life tragedy that took place, that is just sadly one of the many tragedies that countless Palestinians have to face for so long, and still continue to. I'm honestly surprised that this film even managed to theatrically release here in India, given that it had been facing a lot of issues from the censor board, but I'm really glad that it made through despite those challenges, because this is a very necessary film that all of us need to see. It was tough for me to view this film like I do other films because of how relevant and agonizing it is, but it very well works as a piece of art that unabashedly highlights the horrors of current times. The genocide must end, and we should look back on this time with horror and shame. After that, I rewatched Vaapas Aaunga in theaters and also got to see Imtiaz Ali himself up close. That was pretty great. I loved the film even more than I did before. While I still stand by the criticisms I had with it, this is a film that I just absolutely adore and have not been able to stop thinking about. It is easily one of the best films of the year. I love it so much, and I'm so happy that it's getting the recognition it deserves, that people are showing up to theaters finally. It is just wonderful to see. Supergirl. Considering that this was one of my most anticipated films of the year, I was utterly heartbroken. I've been excited for this film ever since it was announced. I had been championing it amidst all the misogynistic haters online who were running hate campaigns against Millie. I was ready to love the new installment of the DCU, but when I started hearing the negative reviews pour in, I got worried. Since I generally tend to favor public opinion, I was scared that there was an actual chance that this movie wasn't going to be any good. But I still went into the theater open-minded with what little hope I had left. Unfortunately, people are right. This is a bad movie. It breaks my heart to say this since I was so excited to see it, but I have to call it out for what it is. I did not like this movie no matter how hard I tried to. As the minutes passed, I slowly came to terms with the fact that this wasn't it. Now, I wouldn't say that it's an egregiously terrible film. It has a few likable qualities. Though I am split on how the movie looks, I would say that the scenes that take place in interior sets look pretty good. I also admired the use of practical effects and puppetry for the alien creatures. It took me back to Star Wars and its heavy use of practical effects. Millie Alcock is a solid Supergirl. Though I did not like the movie, I definitely would want to see more of her in later films that are hopefully better. Jason Momoa as Lobo is fun, despite having no reason to be in the film, but if I were to point out any other positive points, I would be reaching. This movie just does not work on a fundamental level. The characters are incredibly bland and needed way more fleshing out. The plot is paper thin and feels so random and pointless. I did not feel any sense of emotional weight or stakes throughout the entire film. The villain is incredibly bland and forgettable. Any attempts at making us feel for the characters or plot is bogged down by its poor writing. The filmmaking is average. Every single action scene is incomprehensible. The editing is incredibly jarring, and even the VFX looked unfinished and laughably bad in several moments. I have no idea what the film is truly about. Whatever it does attempt to explore is surface level and vague. Everything just felt so null and void. It's baffling to see a superhero movie this generic in 2026. We have already been subjected to countless uninspired comic book movies, and this one brings nothing new, interesting, or even good to the genre. With a crisp runtime of 110 minutes, everything feels rushed. The choppy editing did not allow me to feel anything. Characters are simply hollow archetypes. Emotional beats are forced and unearned. The needle drops are jarringly bad, and the film just feels completely aimless and confused at what it wants to be or what it wants to say. I genuinely take no joy in criticizing this movie. Despite the negative reviews, I went in with an open mind, hoping to love it somehow. But I was just astonished as to how DC even thought that this was something worth putting out for their new cinematic universe. Now, of course, the entire online reaction to this movie can be needlessly extreme at times. Just because I don't like this movie doesn't mean I have anything in common with the Snyder chuds who hate this movie for entirely evil purposes. And I do not think that the DCU is in jeopardy simply because of the existence of one bad film. But I would be lying if I said that this wasn't one of the most heartbreaking disappointments of the year. Since most of these superhero movies are dominated by male characters, I was hoping that this would stand out as a terrific female-led superhero film. Sadly, this film is pretty bad. If it does inspire any girls or women, that would honestly be pretty great, but I do believe that they deserve a much better film of greater quality. I'm not concerned for the state of the DC universe just yet, but gosh, do I hope that Clayface is really good. Yeah, I mean, with just the amount of great films I was watching, I guess I just had to be humbled by the end of the month. And then I ended the month with a rewatch of Disclosure Day. Supergirl was so bad that I just really badly needed a palate cleanser to end the month with, and I'm so happy to have picked Disclosure Day as the final film. My problems with it still stand. I do not think this is a completely perfect movie and definitely not one of Spielberg's best films, but it's still a masterpiece. I loved it so much more, and I just had a wonderful time seeing this again. Definitely one of the best films of the year so far. So yeah, that is what I watched this month. Honestly speaking, this might just be the best month for movies that I've ever had in a very, very long time. Not only did I watch a lot of movies, I watched a lot of great movies. And only few of them were ones I disliked or thought were fine. But otherwise, just the sheer quantity of good movies I watched is insane. I mean, I don't think I've ever given so many 5 stars to this many theatrical releases in a month. Many of the films I watched this June are some of my favorite films of the year so far, and despite watching 12 films, I still managed to rewatch 2 of them, leaving me with 14 trips to the movie theater in this month alone. I truly am so privileged to be able to do such a thing. But yeah, I genuinely feel like I need a break now because the sheer number of times I've been to theaters these past few weeks. I mean, I've already been to the cinemas 70 times this year alone. It is honestly insane how frequently I go to the cinema. Anyway, let's do the end of the video list that is a key segment of this series. These are all the films that I watched in the month of June, and these are the films ranked. It was honestly very difficult for me to do this ranking given that I love so many films from here and given that they're so different from each other, so here is a placeholder ranking for the time being. Now, despite having caught up to so many releases, crazily enough, there were still a few films that I missed out on. Here are the films I missed out on that I was interested to watch, and here is the list of films that I missed out on that I was not at all interested to see. These are the expected hits. Most of the films I watched do end up in this category. Surprisingly, there are 0 expected flops. I did not watch anything that I thought was going to be bad. There were also no pleasant surprises this month. Everything I watched, I either liked because I knew I would, or really disappointed me. Speaking of which, these are the disappointments. And this is the list of films I plan to see next month. And these are the films ranked in order of excitement. July seems like an exciting month at the movies. There are very few films that I am really excited for or looking forward to, especially compared to the amount of movies that I watched this month. But firstly, I would not mind slowing down a little, and second, the films that I am looking forward to are ones that have incredible hype behind them. Odyssey is my most anticipated film of the whole year, and I truly can't wait to experience that film in IMAX. I've already booked my tickets for that film, as well as for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, while I am not as excited for Spider-Man as everyone else is, I will still step into the theater opening day to see what they have done with my favorite fictional character of all time. But there are also some independent films in there that have my curiosity. I'm looking forward to those more than some of the blockbusters coming out. Either way, I hope to have a wonderful July at the movies. I cannot wait to watch everything and talk to you all about it in a month. But until then, thank you so much for watching. I'm sure this video has turned out to be incredibly long because I just watched so much good stuff. But please like, share, subscribe, support the channel. It means the world to me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.